Tamasato ma satgamaya. Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya. Mrityorma mritam gamaya. Avir maeti. Rudro yakte dakshinamukam. Te namam pahinityam. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Om, peace, peace, peace. Good morning.
Good morning.
The topic today is self-sacrifice. According to the Vedas, the creation of the universe is the result of the self-sacrifice of Purusha, the Supreme Person. It's a timeless and continuous act of divine self-sacrifice that maintains the harmony of the universe. And if a man wants to attain harmony and peace, he too has to imitate the divine and make his life a sacrifice or yajna. It is through self-sacrifice that a man recovers the harmony and develops his potential divinity and attains to supreme peace. The Vedic idea of yajna or sacrifice is participation in the living drama of the cosmos. One can't hold anything back. Life gives us food, air, energy, ideas, knowledge, love, and joy. It's a flow, which can be maintained only by giving back what is taken. We don't own what belongs to the universe. The manifested Brahman, or Virat, is established in yajna or self-sacrifice. The food we eat, the water, the air are all sacramental products of the divine sacrifice. As Krishna says in the Gita, I have nothing to gain in the three worlds, yet I continuously work. How do we participate in this? Man's conscious action, which is done and offered to the cosmic being, can be his sacrifice. It has to be consciously done, with no selfish motive. Thus, one can stop making new karmas and actually become aware of the cosmic flow of things. One can unite oneself with the will of God or the cosmic will and allow that to move unobstructed through one's own self. It's a spiritual practice to become self-aware, and this practice frees a man from the bondage of egotism. There's a path that is called Atmajnana, or knowledge of the self. In Sanskrit, there's the injunction, Atma Nam Vidhi, know the self. If we know our true self, we have the key to the whole universe. The universe, which appears to be outside ourselves, is known really only in our inner consciousness. Self-awareness frees one and converts every action into a sacrifice or yajna. For God, sacrifice and meditation are not two separate acts, but two aspects of one single act. Conscious thought and conscious action are only two expressions of one single intentional experience. We have to struggle to unite our will with God's will, to know our real selves. O soul, seek the beloved. O friend, seek the friend. A Christian mystic, Jacob Boehme, once said, before love of God comes into the heart, all the furniture has to fly out the window. What did he mean by that? It is that we have to cleanse our heart. We have to give up everything that is obscuring our own true nature. Our hearts have to be pure. The Persian mystic Rumi tells us, if you can't smell the fragrance, don't come into the garden of love. If you're unwilling to undress, don't enter the stream of truth. Stay where you are. Don't come to us. It is all about self-sacrifice, knowing the self. Vivekananda tells us in his lecture entitled, Non-Attachment is Complete Self-Abnegation, quote, a perfect life is a contradiction in terms. Forgetfulness of self is the one great lesson that we have to learn. The main effect of work done for others is that it purifies ourselves. The highest ideal is eternal and entire self-abnegation, where there is no I, but all is thou, where one is willing to give up his life and everything else for others. The philosopher, the worker, the devotee all meet at this one point. That point is self-abnegation. As Swamiji tells us, the microcosm, the living being, is merely a reflection of the macrocosm. The two are built on the same plan, and they're in contact with each other. In accordance with the law of sacrifice, the divine creates the universe out of itself, and then it enters into it. There's an example given in more than one of the Upanishads of a spider creating a web and then living in it. The avatar comes to earth and takes a human body as a life of sacrifice for the good of mankind. God comes down so that we may know him. This is the law of sacrifice. Nature compels everyone to follow the law of sacrifice knowingly or unknowingly. We too are part of this great worship. Swami Vivekananda goes so far as to say, unselfishness is God. The whole of life can be viewed as this great sacrifice or yajna. The Chandogya Upanishad says, Atman indeed is a sacrifice. Every action offers us an opportunity to sacrifice our little self. Thus Swami Vivekananda says, quote, it is easier to reconcile one's fate as a sacrifice. We are all indeed sacrifices, each in his or her own way. The great worship's going on, and no one can see its meaning, except that it is a sacrifice. Those that are willing escape a lot of pain. Those who resist are broken into submission and suffer more. I am now determined to be a willing sacrifice. Martin Luther King once said, a person must have something which he's willing to die for. This is the crux of it. It has been said, you can have anything that you want if you're willing to give up everything for it. Renounce and give up. The Song of the Sannyasi tells us, this thirst for life forever quench. It drags from birth to death and death to birth the soul. He conquers all who conquers self. Know this and never yield, sannyasin bold. Let go thy hold. Say Om Tat Sat Om. What did Christ say? He that loses his life for my sake shall find it. Again and again do the great ones preach renunciation as the way to perfection. There comes a time when the mind awakens from the long dream. A child gives up its play and longs to go back to its mother. It throws down its toys. Then the mother comes. The soul finds the truth of Yayati's statement, desire is never satisfied by the enjoyment of desire. It only increases more. As fire, when butter is poured on it, flares up. But like Yayati, who was even given the youth of his own son so he could have more enjoyment before he was able to renounce, many of us need to enjoy before we're ready for renunciation. Sometimes it takes a long time for this desire for God to arise in us. We have to get many blows in the world first. Swamiji says, plunge into the world. And then, after a time when you've suffered and enjoyed all that it has to offer, renunciation will come. Calmness will come. So fulfill your desire for power, for everything else. After you have fulfilled this desire, you will come to a time when you know they are very little things. But until you have fulfilled these desires, until you have passed through that activity, it's impossible for you to come to a state of calmness, serenity, and self-surrender. People such as Peter Fenwick, who've done studies in near-death experience, say that when a person is in the process of dying, at some point there comes a moment when you know you're going to die, and it'll hit you hard. You know you're not going to come back to this life anymore. At this point, you have to start giving up everything. It's absolutely fundamental. You have to give up everything. Your wife, your family, your house, your children, everything, even your own body in the end. If you do not, if you remain attached, attachment is the most difficult when you are dying. If you can give everything up, you will have a smooth transition. You'll go from this pre-transitional state where you are attached to transition to post-transition, where you have in fact given up everything. In post-transition, he says, you go more and more into the spiritual domain, where at the end, if you have lost your ego, you will lose that part of yourself which is the differentiated part, and you will become what is called non-dual, because that is your real nature. That means you in fact do merge with the universe. You lose all the trappings of the individual person, and you merge with the great cosmos which is behind it. The data shows you will become universal, and it shows if you don't give up the things to which you're attached, you'll have a very difficult death process. You will have two things happening. One will be pulling you into fusion with the infinite, and the other will be pulling you back into differentiation, into the self. Then you will have what is called spiritual restlessness. It's not pleasant. It's a state of anxiety because you're being pulled back constantly by your attachments. Before one goes into hospice, he says, one needs to understand that in the end you will have to give up everything. It's important to know that we have to give up everything in order to enter into the light. This doesn't mean suicide. It means going into the light. It is possible to practice this before death. The Dalai Lama says he actually practices dying every day in his meditation. He practices giving up all these little things and entering into the light. When I was little, maybe about 8 years old, I remember thinking, I have to understand death before that time comes when I will die. Much later, I found Swami Vivekananda, and he said, first kill yourself, and then regard the world as your whole self, your own self. The old man must die, the Christian mystics say. The old man is the selfish idea that the whole world is made for our enjoyment. Still later, I found another poem of Rumi. Quote, O man, go die before thou diest, so that thou shalt not have to suffer death when thou shalt die. Such a death from which thou wilt enter into the light, not a death through which thou enters into the grave. In the case of an illumined soul who has realized God, he has died, as it were. He still may have to bear the effects of his prarabdha karma, but he no longer reacts to it at all. Swamiji gives the example of a wheel which has been cut from the axle. It rolls on for a while through its past momentum, and then it wobbles and falls to the ground. The sage may continue to live for some time after illumination, but he won't make any more new karma, for he knows he's not the doer. This is what dies, the sense of doership. The prana, or life energy, is constantly activating our samskaras, and desires arise in our minds. But it's only when our will attaches to them that they become our own, and then they bind us. If the will is withdrawn through unselfish action and detachment, the desires themselves will wither away, and they'll die out of the mind. A detached person sees desires arise and fall in his mind, but he's not attached to them. We have samskaras, grooves in our mind, which give us the tendency to repeat past action. The karma bijas, or seed actions of the mind, the karmasya, or the tendencies to repeat these actions, are only completely destroyed by spiritual illumination when they're burnt, as it were. Through karma yoga, however, they can be, and they are, reduced to a latent state, and the mind turns inward. If the will is detached from desires, the soul remains as a witness. Swamiji tells us we first have to give up the idea of attachment and then work as a witness. It's a love freely given, without expecting anything in return, that brings the karma yogi to do social service. The karma yogi uses the inward turning of his mind to project his powers outside for the welfare of the world. Love in Hinduism is identified with the unifying power of existence. All life is one, and love is an expression of the unity of life. The karma yogi is regulating his activities in tune with the rhythm of universal love. This is actually true knowledge. We are to work through freedom, Swamiji tells us, work through love. And what does he mean by this word love? He means unselfish action. The minute we have a motive, the minute we want something in return, our work has become selfish. It's the idea, I am the doer, that's the problem. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna tells Arjuna that he works because he loves the world. That's his only motive. In order to love in an unselfish manner, we have to always take the position of the giver. Give, give, give. That's the one thing, as Swamiji tells us. Then only can we work without attachment. Attachment comes when we expect a return. Real devotion is far off till the aspirant realizes the immanence of God in everything. It is this understanding of the unity of everything and in every person that is the central point behind Swami Vivekananda's ideal of service. This is real knowledge. When service becomes an expression of love for the divinity behind everything and in every being, it has reached its fulfillment. There's a discipline called self-abnegation. One must relinquish what one knows to be superficial and therefore untrue. Everything that one knows is a veil covering the face of truth. One must reject it in thought and in behavior. This universe is really a veil that is covering the face of God, the truth. Let us give up our whole body and mind and everything as an eternal sacrifice unto the Lord and be at peace, perfect peace within ourselves. Instead of pouring oblations into the fire as a sacrifice, pour this one great sacrifice day and night, the sacrifice of your little self. Quote, I searched for wealth in this world. Thou art the only wealth that I found. I sacrifice myself to thee. I searched for someone to love. Thou art the only beloved I have found. I sacrifice myself to thee. Let us repeat this day and night and say nothing for me, no matter whether the thing's good, bad, or indifferent. I don't care for it. I sacrifice all to thee. The only true duty is to be unattached and to work as free beings, to give up all work unto God. All our duties are His. We're blessed that we're sent here. We serve our time, and whether we do it well or ill, who knows? Let us be at rest, at peace, be free and work. This kind of freedom is very hard to attain. Seek no result. Swami Vivekananda tells us religion consists in realization. We all know that nothing will satisfy us till we know the truth about our inner self. However we may argue, however much we may hear, only one thing will satisfy us, and that's our own realization. And such an experience is not possible unless we are willing to give up. But it is possible for every one of us if we will only try. The first ideal of this attempt is realization, and it is what religion means. And the ideal is renunciation. As far as we can, we have to give up. Karma yoga is based on eternal principles which are universal. And the first is that selfless work actually is completely natural. As Krishna tells Arjuna again in the Gita, we're forced to work by our own nature, and by nature herself. Quote, O Arjuna, the Lord is seated in the heart of all beings, and He whirls him around and around as though mounted on a machine. He tells Arjuna to take refuge in that prime mover. All karma is simply a transformation of energy and matter. They're part of a cosmic movement of Prakriti and Purusha, as it were. The mind constantly moves because of the action of prana, or life force. All we can do is regulate that flow of thought, according to Patanjali. The whole universe is in this dynamic state. It's always in movement. It's ever-changing. No karma is actually ours. Our little ego tries to own a part of the universal action, and it calls it mine. Selfless action is the true action done by Prakriti, or the will of God. Egotism is actually a reaction to the natural stream of life. It's an attempt to appropriate actions and separate itself from the universal flow. Shakali tomaricha icha mai taratumi tomar karma tumi karma loke bole karyami. It's a song which means, O Mother, all is done by thy sweet will. Thou art self-willed, O Mother of mine. Thou workest thy own work. Men only call it theirs. The whole world says, I am the doer. But it really is Mother who is doing. Selfless action is actually spontaneous. It's natural. It's relaxing and it's peaceful. But Prakriti is doing everything for us. It's the gunas working on the gunas. It's possible for a person to become in tune with this process It depends on the state of mind of the doer. What binds us to the world is not work. It's desires and egotism. Work must be done with self-awareness, an awareness of the awakened, detached self behind all action. Karma or work will not make new samskaras when the self is detached from desire. This is what is called nishkama karma. Work without desire. Working without any motive. Work for work's sake, Swamiji tells us. Ordinary work tends to lead to more work and bind us more and more. Karma yoga is the means of getting out of the whirlpool of ego in which we're caught and letting Prakriti do the work. We work in a detached manner. This is called dexterity in work, or karma kushalena, efficiency in action. It doesn't mean you're going to do more and more work. It means working in harmony with detachment, in tune with the will of God, as it were. The karma yogi's detachment is not a cold aloofness. It's born out of love for all people equally. He accepts his own limitation and the polarities of life, the happiness and the sorrow, good and evil, and he works on without seeking any reward. He's aware of the larger existence that includes all. His work is based on dharma. He constantly discriminates between what should be done and what should not be done. Kara, akara, vastu viveka. Discrimination is a big part of karma yoga. And the final goal of discrimination is to see the truth of truths. Satya, satya, satyasya satya. Truth of truths. The oneness of the universe. Yajna means doing all work as a sacrifice. The whole world is a cosmic sacrifice. The realization of the ultimate reality is true religion, which is both individual and social. Realization is individual, but men of realization see God everywhere as the Spirit, the sum total of all souls. They know that they're not the doer of action. They become united with the will of God or the cosmic action. There once was a monk, his name was Abhishekananda. He actually was a Christian monk who lived in India. And he wore Garawa. He decided to renounce and go to the Himalayas for tapasya. And he packed up a small bundle with a few coins and a change of clothes to go to the mountains. But God really blessed him. No sooner did he start out than someone stole his bundle and he was left with nothing. He had the sincerity and insight to realize that that was the way he should have gone in the first place, holding on to nothing but God. So he continued his journey joyfully. They say it's not possible for the illumined soul to take a wrong step. It's like an expert piano player or dancer. He no longer thinks about playing, he simply plays. He doesn't make any mistake. He dances in tune with the whole cosmos. It's hard to understand how this differs from a passive state, but it does. Listen to the words of Sister Nivedita. Arise, my child, go forth a man, and bear manfully what it is thy lot to bear. That which comes to thy hand to be done, do with full strength. Fear not. Forget not that I, the giver of manhood and of womanhood, the holder of victory, am thy mother. Think not life is serious. What is destiny but mother's play? Come, be my playfellow a while. Meet all happenings cheerfully. Murmurest thou in need of a purpose? Think the ball is purposeless with which the mother plays? Knowest thou not that her toy is a thunderbolt, charged with power to shatter worlds? at the turn of her wrist? Ask not of plans. Needs the arrow any plan to be loosened from the bow? Such art thou when life is lived, and the plan will stand revealed. Till then, O child of time, know nothing. My sport is unerring. For that alone set forth on thy day's journey. Think it was for my pleasure thou camest forth into the world, and for that again when night falls. And my desire is accomplished, I shall withdraw thee to my rest. Ask nothing, seek nothing, plan nothing. Let my will flow through thee as the ocean through an empty shell. Swamiji says that the life of sannyas must be one of self-sacrifice. The true sannyasins forego even their own liberation and live simply for doing good to the world, for the good of the many. For the happiness of the many is the sannyasin born. His life is vain indeed, who embracing sannyasa forgets this ideal. The sannyasin verily is born to lay down his life for others. The sacrifices of the householder of one type, and the sacrifices of the sannyasin another. When the sannyasin finally renounces all worldly ties, after performing the external ritual called Viraja Homa, the sannyasin symbolically transforms his higher self into the fire altar, and henceforth his whole life becomes a sacrificial living, and he continuously offers every thought, action, experience, the ego itself, as an oblation into the inner fire. The flame color of the clothes that a sannyasin wears is a symbol of the inner altar of fire, and reminds him constantly of the sacrificial nature of the monastic vocation. He's called an Atmajnanin, or self-sacrificer. The most important function of the law of sacrifice is the transformation of consciousness. This unites karma and upasana, work and meditation. Swamiji tells us we won't be happy until we're willing to give. Everyone sacrifices. The husband for the sake of the wife for the child. Even birth itself is a great sacrifice. Every mother knows this. At first we sacrifice because we want something in return. Later we understand that all individual lives are only part of the cosmic lives and are governed by universal laws, such as this law of sacrifice. A person understands that all work is done by the divine. Then he remains the witness of the cosmic process going on all around him. He does not think he's sacrificing. He simply lets the divine work goes on unimpeded by the resistance of his own ego. When one realizes Brahman, the ego, the mind, the body get divinized and become channels of divine power or Shakti. Sacrifice becomes complete cooperation with the universal will of the divine, the joy of self-giving. And prayer is also part of this sacrifice. Learning to pray is also learning to listen. With the heart, we wait for an answer, for God's word, which may come even when we haven't asked for it. Listening is a form of prayer, in which our whole being is receptive. Prayer is communion with God, and we share with Him our needs, but we also learn to be attentive. As Rumi again so beautifully writes, make everything in you an ear, each atom of your being, and you will hear every moment what the source is whispering to you, just to you, for you, without any need for my words or anyone else's. You are, we are, the beloved. And in every moment, In every event of your life, the Beloved is whispering to you exactly what you need to hear and know. Who can ever explain this miracle? It simply is. Listen, and you will discover it. In every passing moment, listen, and your whole life will become a conversation in thought and act between you and Him, directly, wordlessly, now and always. Listening within the heart is attuning ourselves to our Beloved. We develop the ear of the heart, the inner listening of the soul. Sometimes God communicates directly with words. We may hear these words, as one Christian mystic said, as a still small voice, or it might come suddenly as a thought appearing in the mind. In the silence of receptive prayer, the prayer of quiet, we may hear words of help and guidance, or our innermost thoughts may speak to us in dream, when words carry an energy that we know doesn't just belong to our psyche. Sometimes we open a book, and we just know that those words we're reading right now were meant for us. In so many ways, some known, some hidden, God speaks to us and answers our prayer. It is the silence of the world that is real. Our noise, our business, our purpose, our statements about our purpose are all noise. These are illusions. God is present, and His thought is alive and awake in the fullness and depth and breadth of the silence of the world. Sometimes you can hear the Spirit whispering to you, but if God stays silent, what do? Except listen to the silence. Most important for us today, though, may be our experience of the quiet yet overpowering consciousness inside of us as to what is right, what is real, what matters in this life, what is essential for us to do. This small voice speaks the deepest truths that we know. It comes to us at moments of intense joy, but it also comes in sadness when we feel most alone. The inner voice can lift us out of despair. It can remind us that our lives have a meaning and a purpose. The Psalms say, "Be still and know that I am God." Holiness consists simply in doing God's will and being just what God wants us to be. And sacrifice is the only test of love, the sign of wisdom and proof of strength. Your giving is a struggle for higher consciousness and harmony. This calls for sacrifice of the ego. All our actions must be connected to our inner light, the light of the Atman. This is the knowledge sacrifice spoken of in the Gita. It is through this sacrifice that man realizes the Atman. Paul tells us, "I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercy of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, acceptable, and perfect." There's a story of a guru who told his disciple to renounce, and the disciple went out and he gave up everything, gave away all the things that he had. The guru told him again, "Renounce." The disciple began to live in poverty, alone, with no possessions at all. The guru again asked him to renounce, and the disciple didn't know any more he could do. He built a fire and decided he was going to throw his body into the fire. When he approached the fire, the guru appeared and pulled him back. The guru said, "I told you to renounce, and when I said renounce, I meant the ego." It's our egotism and desire that have to be given up. This is what we have to let go of. This is how we turn life into worship. We have to be transformed We have to be transformed in our minds and hearts, not just our external behavior, but the way we feel and think. Be transformed by the renewal of your mind. Many times God will use other people to try to get through to us. It's possible for God to use anybody at any time. Sometimes the only way God can reach us is to allow circumstances in our life to lead us through the very thing we need to discover. Most of the time, God uses an inner voice inside us to let us know when we're not on the right path. Some people call it the voice of peace. When we're contemplating something and we don't have peace about it, it's a very good idea to stop and carefully look at the options. There's a reason why you don't feel peace about it. Sometimes we're able to hear something in our spirit that sounds like an actual audible voice, or suddenly we just know what the right thing is. Pay attention to those occasions, because it's very likely that God is trying to tell you something. Vairagya, or renunciation, is the turning point of all the various yogas. The karma yogi renounces the fruit of his work. The bhakta renounces all little loves for the almighty and omnipresent love. The yogi renounces his experiences because his philosophy is that the whole of nature, although it is for the experience of the soul, at last brings him to know that he's not in nature, but he's separate from it. Jnana teaches that the world should be renounced, but not on that account abandoned. To live in the world, but not be of it, is the true test of renunciation. Quote, like a lotus leaf abides on the water rolls right off of it. Just so the jnani renounces everything because his philosophy is that nature never existed, neither in the past or the present or in the future. The world can't touch him. The Bhagavad Gita in chapter 3 tells us, freedom from activity is never achieved by abstaining from action. No one can become perfect by ceasing to act. In fact, nobody can ever rest from some kind of activity, even for a moment. All are helplessly forced to act by the gunas. The world is imprisoned in its own action, and except when the actions are performed as a worship of God. Therefore, you have to do every action sacramentally and be free from attachments to the result. Man, deluded by his egotism, thinks, I am the doer. But he who has true insight into the operations of the gunas and their function knows that when the senses attach themselves to objects, the gunas are merely attaching themselves to gunas. Know this and don't become attached to actions. The ideal of renunciation nowhere attains such great height as in the teaching of Vedanta, but at the same time, suicidal advice is not intended. It means seeing the world as a blissful consciousness. To know what really is, deify it. It is God alone. We read in the beginning of the Isha Upanishad, one of the oldest Upanishads, whatever exists in this world is to be covered by the Lord. By this renunciation of the world, support yourself. We have to cover everything with the Lord Himself by seeing God in everything. Thus we have to give up, to let go of the world. And when the world is given up, what remains? God. We have to go to the reality which is behind everything and in everything, and renunciation will take us there. It's the basis of our true life. This little separate self must die, and then we will find that the reality is God. He is our own true nature. He's always with us. The path through renunciation is the way to the goal, not through enjoyment. If you want to help others, your little self has to go. Throw away everything, even your own salvation, and go to help others. Give up all that thou hast and give to the poor and follow me, Jesus said. This is the one ideal Christ preaches. And this has been the ideal preached by all the great prophets of the world. Give, give, give. That's the one thing. Swamiji tells us what is meant by renunciation is that there is only one ideal in morality, unselfishness. Be selfless. The ideal is pure unselfishness. The illumined soul, whose heart is in Brahman, thinks always, I'm doing nothing. No matter what he sees, touches, hears, smells, eats, no matter whether he's moving, sleeping, breathing, speaking, grasping, or opening or closing his eyes, he always knows, I am not seeing, I am not hearing. It is the senses that hear and touch and see the things of the senses. He rests on action, untouched by action. Quote, happy is that dweller in the city of 9 gates, whose discrimination has cut him free from his acts. He is not involved in action. He does not involve others. Do not say God gave us this delusion. You dream you're the doer. You dream that action is done. You dream that action bears fruit. It's your ignorance. It is the world's delusion that gives you these dreams. The Lord is everywhere and always perfect. What does he care for man's sin or the righteousness of man? Atman is the light. The light is covered by darkness. The darkness is delusion, and that is why we dream. When the light of the Atman drives out our darkness, that light shines forth from us, a sun in splendor. The revealed Brahman, the devoted dwell with him. They know him always, there in the heart where action is not. He is their aim. Made free by his knowledge from past uncleanness of deed or thought, they find the place of freedom, the place of no return. His mind is dead to the touch of the external. It's alive to the bliss of the Atman. Because his heart knows Brahman, his happiness is forever. Only that yogi whose joy is inward, his peace is inward, his vision inward, shall come to Brahman and know nirvana. End of quote. This is the state described in the Bible. In him we move, live, and have our being. We have only to give back to God what is already his. He's the only doer. Man in his delusion thinks, I am doing. O Mother, all is done by thy sweet will. Thou art self-willed, O Mother of mine. Thou workest thy own work, men only call it there. And again, theirs. And again, to quote Rumi, a man must go die before he diest, so that he may not have to suffer the death when he shall die. Such a death through which thou enterest into the light, not a death through which thou wilt enter unto the grave. Thank you. Om Jyo Shantir Antariksham Shanti Prithvi Shantir Apa Shanti Oshadaya Shantir Vanaspataya Shantir Vishwe Deva Shantir Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantir Eva Shanti Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace is in the heaven, peace is in the sky, on the earth and in the waters. The herbs, the plants, the trees are all full of peace. The gods are peaceful. Everything in the universe is pervaded by peace. May this eternal universal peace enter our soul and being. Peace, peace, peace be unto us all.